So, welcome to Comfortable Conversations. I'm your host, Jazz Kirk, where we dive into the greatest gift life can offer us, discomfort. Today's guest I have is Ella, and I just want to begin by saying when I met Ella, when you think of like calm seas, that is her personality. Like, even as we were getting set up right now, like, your voice is so calm, so soothing. Your spirit, your energy is that. So I'm so excited for us to just, like, dive right in. How are you doing today?
I feel like just hearing you say that, I started to tear up. So I must be nice and plugged into my heart today. It's a rainy, gloomy day in Dallas, and we're post-election results this week, and I'm also not feeling 100%.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling just here and just happy to be here and just grateful to know that you're going to lead the reins and see where we go in this conversation. I'm just happy to be here.
Yeah, well, you bring a very euphoric energy wherever you are, so I'm really happy to share you with our audience. I feel like you have a depth of, like, knowledge and wisdom. So just to dive right in, what discomfort led you to be this version of Ella who's very zen, I know you said you're sick, but you're still radiating an energy right now.
Yeah, so a lot of discomfort led to this. And even when you were just like announcing me or introducing me, there are so many people that would hear you say those words and say, that is not Ella Leupold. So there we go. I used to have a lot of anger inside of me. I had a lot of big emotions that I feel like I had no idea what to do with throughout my whole life. Like I present very calm, cool, and collected, but on the inside, it was like rage against the machine.
Yeah.
And so there's been a lot of discomfort and moments of feeling not worthy and moments of feeling not chosen and moments of feeling not enough. And in the last few years, I've really just kind of created this internal relationship with myself and all of the parts of me, most importantly, all the little girls inside of me who didn't feel seen or didn't feel loved. And I feel like I'm almost like their big sister, their mom. And so, there's been just a lot of moments of discomfort that have led to this.
Well, I love that you began with this just like vulnerability of anger, because I think a lot of people can relate to externally I present one way and internally I was like, there were battles. I know. So I have a way with my dreams that I'm like, your dreams are your subconscious of what's below the surface that's really going on. And if ever I have dreams where I'm like in crazy arguments or fighting, I'm like, there's some anger residing somewhere. And your dream was your opportunity to, like, just let you know, like, hey, we got to get this out.
Yes.
Because you don't always showcase that side of you. So can you unpack, like, the years of anger and kind of how you worked through that?
Yeah. So I wouldn't say it's just anger. It was just a lot of big emotions. And if I really want to just, like, cut right down to the root of it and, like, get through all the fluff, when I was born, my mom wasn't married and my dad wasn't in my life. And that, I mean, going back 30 years, like, everyone felt like they were in a nuclear family, mom, dad, children, white picket fence. And I just had so much confusion around why my dad wasn't in my life. And I knew him for the first few years of my life, but he is an alcoholic. And so my mom decided that it would be best for him to not be in my life. And so just growing up in those kind of like monumental times, like Father's Day or when I danced, so like the daddy-daughter dance. Even now, like thinking about it, like my like throat starts to shake. And so it was like there was all these big emotions that anger felt like it was just easier to kind of like push it all down. And so then I found substances. I found alcohol could take the edge off. So like throughout my high school and college years, like I was leaning heavy into that and just like how quickly can I kind of how can you numb yourself? Yeah, exactly. And I feel like like so many of us, I just didn't have tools to process my emotions. And growing up, I was so blessed that my mom is incredible and my grandma was like my second parent. And so I felt like complete. I was like, I have these two parents, these two figures in my life who love me so much and speak so much life into me. Why does it still feel like there's this gaping hole that can never be filled? And so, yeah, really when I started meditation and going to therapy, that was like the instant, like, this is the root of it all. This is like why, like, I always felt like I needed to be so big. I felt like I needed to be the best dancer, the funniest person, the prettiest girl. Like, I was super hard on myself academically, which is also really funny to think about now because I'm like, I'll text you back in 3 weeks if you're lucky, you know.
You may get something, you may not.
Yes.
But charge it to the game and not my heart.
Exactly. But when I first, the first therapist I ever met, when that kind of came up in our first session around like not having a relationship with my father, she said something like, do you feel like you had to achieve your way to love? And I was like, yes. And like I was always so confused by that because I could do a cartwheel. My mom be like, Ella, you're so amazing. And I even remember there was this one moment in like elementary school. I was practicing for a spelling word test.
Yeah.
There was like 20 words, and I had gotten one letter of one word wrong. And Jazz, I was like banging my head on the table, like flipping it. Like and I didn't understand like where that came from until later on in therapy. It was like, oh, wow, yeah, there was that little bit of like confusion and hurt that I just didn't know what to do with.
So take us to when you actually got introduced to meditation, where it became a practice for you.
Yeah.
Because if people don't know, you also teach meditation. So how long before you started to teach had you been practicing, and when did you get introduced to it?
So I got introduced to meditation in probably 2019.
Okay.
Maybe 2018. No, 2019. And I just started super simply going to sound baths.
Okay.
I think sound is such a beautiful entry point for people who don't meditate, just because how on such a physical level it helps your body to slow down, shift into that relaxation response. Maybe for the first time experiencing a parasympathetic nervous system, you know, like that feeling of safety. So I actually had really bad vocal nodes at the time. I was teaching fitness full time. I sounded like this all the time.
Oh my God.
Crazy. So like, and you know, girls are like, oh, I love to have a scratchy voice.
No, not until you have a scratchy voice. Then
And
they're
like, yes. And like just little things like a phone call, going through a drive-through, like all of those things, it was so difficult. And it really hurt to talk. So every time I went to say something to someone, I would think to myself, is this worth saying right now?
Yeah.
And if not, I'm just not going to say it. Because they're going to say, what? And I'm going to have to say it. Like,
have you ever, I experienced losing my voice when I went to Miami with my best friend one year. And it literally was like the night before we decided to go out, have drinks. And then I woke up and I was like, I have no.
Yes.
And I was going to Miami, and it was like the hardest experience ever, because it was like you really do have to like think about when am I about to use my voice? Or then you have to like lean on, let me just text this because I'm really not going to go back and forth with you.
Yes.
And like I'm holding up my phone to people like this is what I'm trying to say. And they're looking like, are you mute?
Yes.
Yeah, literally I am.
Yes.
So but
that
also
was literally
Eat,
months.
Pray, Love. There was a scene in Eat, Pray, Love where she was not supposed, like they couldn't speak. And it like really does help you. The silence of that really does help you in a meditational space.
Totally. Yeah, and like there's such beauty to, like I did 5 days of vocal rest, and that was like such a beautiful time to like truly hear my thoughts, you know, and like but to be in that kind of like extended in and out of vocal rest was exhausting because, you know, in Dallas, we like to go out to eat. We're in noisy environments, but it's just hard.
Yeah.
So to find reprieve from all of that, I found this meditation studio that had sound baths on Friday nights. And I was also going through a season of my life where I was sober. Okay. And so I just wanted something to do. So I would go to these sound baths, and I just started having really healing experiences. And I had a few really powerful meditations where I was like in my grandma's house and I was with my grandma again. And I would have super vivid memories from my childhood, which was all just like a blank screen before.
Yeah.
And I would just cry during them. And I wasn't sad, but it was just like these residual emotions were like finally having some space to come up and out. And so I also just started to like change, like ever so slightly. Like I felt like I was just a little bit less reactive. So I wasn't like meditating every day by any means. I didn't have a practice, but I was just going to the studio maybe twice a week.
Okay.
And then the owner, she said, you should go through a 200-hour meditation teacher training. And I said, for what? Like, I'm just
trying to like get my voice back, man.
Yeah. And shout out to Rachel Fox forever. She like really changed the course of my life, because I went to one workshop at the studio and she asked me to be an ambassador. And I said, I don't meditate. And she's like, I just think you need to be here and I want you to be an ambassador of our studio. And so that, of course, gave me the invitation to come. And then I ended up applying for a scholarship for the 200-hour meditation teacher training and got half scholarship. So I was like, why not?
Do you ever feel like in that discomfort, because that you not having a voice began to create this discomfort, do you ever feel like sometimes you needed that to happen to be introduced to this practice? Because just how I said, you have this calm spirit. Like, you may be loud and spunky or whatever, but your spirit says something else that Rachel was able to be like, this is for you, you know? Like, it's crazy how like, in the moment we're like, I need my voice to come back. I need to be able to communicate, enunciate. But this, in the background, something magnificent was, like, emerging.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That whole time really just changed the course of my life. I think if I wouldn't have gone through having vocal nodes, I think I would still just be teaching at the studios I was at, which would be great. But going through meditation then kind of took me out of like the group fitness space.
Okay.
And then I started doing stuff on my own, which then just kind of like turned into this whole new path of like being in different spaces without having to be associated with a studio. And people reaching out to me directly for things rather than always through a studio. I do think like some sort of mindful movement would be a part of my life for sure, just because in dance I learned so much of how to process and metabolize emotions through movement. And my dance teacher was like such an advocate of improv and just like really helping us to just like get out there and just move and see what happens.
Get into your body in a way that's just like not always say, like sometimes in yoga people are anticipating the next move, that you're not completely solely present, but like when you can dance and flow, it's like you are so present, you're just really connecting back into your body.
Yeah, and even more so too, like connecting to your body so much, like where say a teacher says something and you're craving to like circle your arm in that movement. Like, yes, do that. Like I say that at the beginning of every class. I'm like, if you're doing something completely different, that's awesome. And I'm probably going to love to see what you're doing. Because I think that's something that's missing in movement practices is that like autonomy. Like I don't know what your body feels like. I know what I'm going to put you through as a solid flow, but like if your shoulder's feeling some type of way or your hips, like listen to your body. And I think that's like the greatest gift we can give anyone is like that gift of choice. Yeah. And like permission and encouragement to like choose so and do so.
I love that. I also wonder, so 2019 you really got introduced to meditation, so random, but then you also brought up therapy was something that you also started to recognize all those big emotions. Were you introduced to therapy early on in high school, college years, or when did you, and not just when did you get introduced to it, but when did you take it serious for the path of your journey?
Of course I knew what therapy was. I thought it was or a place that people go when they've experienced a death or they've experienced like a certain capital T trauma.
Okay. That's what you associated therapy with.
Yeah. I never thought it was something that I could just go just to like
I need
explore
this
my
for me.
past. And
Yeah.
like, you know, I didn't think that I had anything. And like hindsight, I definitely should have been in therapy when my grandma died. Because I was a freshman in high school. That's such confusing times. And
Yeah.
my family dynamic had changed a lot. It went from just me and my mom to my mom got married to my stepdad and they had a kid. And my relationship with him wasn't great. So it was kind
Yeah.
of like this. And then my grandma died. And so like that would have been a great time to have started therapy, but that didn't happen.
Because losing a, and you said your grandma was like a parent to you, so losing a parent is a capital T
Yes.
moment.
Yes.
But I could see if you think about it as like, oh, I lost my grand. No, that's still a capital T moment.
Yeah. But at the time, like, I don't think I knew one friend who was in therapy. I
Yeah,
don't think I had
same.
one friend who was a therapist. I don't know if my mom had ever been to therapy. Like, it just wasn't, I feel like, as much of a
Cultural norm as it is now.
Exactly. So in that time when I had vocal nodes, I was literally like, what can heal me on any level? And so I had some really awesome friends who just pointed me in some different directions. Jazz, I was doing everything. I started doing something called network spinal entrainment, which
Okay.
is incredible, with this man named Jarrett Browning,
Okay.
who's in Dallas. I'm actually going to start seeing him again because he has worked some miracles on my nervous system.
Okay.
He has a practice called Align. I started doing cranial sacral therapy. I started doing, then I saw a real therapist. I was doing like plant medicine. I was doing Reiki. Literally like anything that had the word heal, I would
You were
try.
like, please sign me up.
Yes.
I'll try it tomorrow.
Yes. And I feel like there is more, but yeah, really just in that time, I was like, anything will help me, because I was also realizing that my nervous system was so dysregulated. And that was also like causing my vocal cords to be more constricted and more inflamed, more friction, which makes the nodes worse.
Okay.
So yeah, it was during that season that I then saw a therapist for the first time, and just started down that journey.
So as you're going into therapy, and it sounds like this season that you were in really was you getting curious and like owning like something's wrong, and you didn't want to, respond how you had been responding. Can you talk about that? Like, what flick switch like happened that you were like, I need to try a new way?
I would say my whole life really was like kind of like super responsive, and then like the dust settles and you're like, ooh. And then you got to go back and pick up the pieces and be like, I really didn't mean to say that, you know?
Yeah.
But like circling back to when I first started doing sound baths, I started to notice that those times were getting less and less frequent. And I was just becoming less and less reactive, to the point where even like my mom picked up on it. Like the people close to me were like, I feel like you're just a little bit different. So there wasn't one giant blow up where I was like, this needs to change. If there were a moment, it would have been in college, because there were plenty of moments where I'm like, this is completely out of hand. Like, it was such a cycle. Like, for 2 years, I lived in the sorority. On the weekends, I'd black out Friday, Saturday night, and then every single Saturday, Sunday morning, I'd have to like be like, who did I yell at last night? Like, who did I bitch at last night? Like, it was not cool. And it was, and then I felt shame around that. So what do? Let's go day drinking, you know? And like, it was just this cycle where it was like, I was the really fun yes girl until it got to be like 2 a.m. And then I felt like my demons came out, and I was just like,
listen, I feel like we all have them. And that's why it's so important to hold these conversations, because it's like, but you're no longer her.
yes.
And I think with your story, little by little, in little increments, there was like this shift and change. And that's where a lot of magic happens, where people don't give themselves the grace to say, like, if you put in the work, and even with meditation, you didn't jump full force in where it's like, my practice is 7 days a week, I meditate for this length of time. It was like giving yourself the grace to welcome it in, to become a practice for the rest of your life. And I love to hear that, because I think so many people have to be encouraged. Like, like when you look back 5 years from now, you will see like you'll look like a completely different person. But until then, like, love yourself along the way.
Yes. And something that you just said, like, I am not her anymore. On the flip side, something that has helped me so much is something called internal family systems. And that's a type of therapy which would encourage me to remember that I am her and that she's this part of me that is still lovable.
Yeah.
And she just was hurt and didn't know what to do with it. But so the first therapist I saw, I didn't really do too much healing with. Like after like the 4th session, she was like, so remind me about your dad. I was like, okay, you have clearly not been paying attention.
Oh my God. It is so, that's a discussion in itself. Like letting go of therapists who just they're not your therapist.
Yes,
That's it.
Yes. And so I had taken some time off, and then I had heard about internal family systems, which, are you familiar with that? Okay, so it's like, if you're not, it kind of sounds like it's external, like your family system, but it's actually all internal.
Within your body.
Yes, it's like all these different parts of us.
So when you think about Inside Out, the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I love about internal family systems is this idea that, like, we're all innately good. We have things that happen to us and parts act out in certain ways because of that. But, like, on the deepest part of us, we're all innately good. And in internal family systems, they have this concept of the self, like the capital S self. And there's 8 C's that are associated with that. It's the part of you that feels calm, curious, compassionate, connected. I can't remember the other 3.
I was going with you. I was like, okay, we'll get them to y'all. It's okay.
But you know that feeling of just like feeling like your best self. Like it's like in those moments, like I feel like at the end of like a yoga practice in Shavasana, or like the end of any like movement practice, you're like, oh, I feel good and I feel like me.
Yeah.
So in IFS, we want to connect to the self first. And then from the self, you look at all these other different parts. And then from that place of compassion, I can see that version of me in college and just be like, oh, baby girl, come here. It's okay. You know? And so rather than almost like rejecting and being like, that was me, that's not me anymore, it's like, it's all me and it's all good. And I have love for all of it, even like the yucky, sticky parts that I wish I wouldn't have done. Like, I don't know. I think that honestly has like moved the needle for me so much. And I worked with a therapist a few years ago, and we just had some profound like things that I thought was just going to be stuck in my heart forever. We did one session and it changed, and I was like, whoa. So it's really potent and powerful. So if anyone is like wanting to get into therapy, but if they feel like just talking about things isn't going to help, IFS is incredible. I don't have a recommendation because my therapist actually closed her practice and just decided she was ready to retire. But that helped me infinitely. And it also helps me see other people better too.
Yeah, but it also, when it comes to therapy, the one thing you have to figure where you are in life, like you just have to go down that road and figure out what therapist is best for you. I think sometimes people experience, like, just like you said, a therapist that you're like, we're not in alignment. Like I had that experience with the therapist. It was right after my breakup. And she ended up saying, like, first of all, that breakup was capital T dramatic. And I, like, was referred to her, of course, like, with the work I do and the work I do on myself. I even shared, like, okay, this is what I'm dealing with, and none of this stuff is working for me. So I know I'm, like, going through something. And she was a somatic therapist, but when I tell you we were just not in alignment, like our first session, she was like, we're going to talk about the breakup for 5 minutes and then we're going to move on. What he did was shit and we're going to move on. And I was like, why do all my friends get to like talk about their exes 101 times? And that's like, I just want to sit and like rant and let something out because I had spent so long not being heard that I finally was like, baby Jazz was like, we're right here and we feel wounded. We don't feel heard. We feel like we're walking on eggshells. And I literally would like, I would have so much anxiety in therapy. And she would be like, how are you feeling in your body? And I'm like, I don't know how to tell her rage. So I was like hiding, like, I'm feeling fine. You know, we're feeling fine. But deep down, I was like, okay, she's not for me. And I had to have that conversation. And then whenever I'm looking for a therapist, I'm always like, I need to kind of date and figure out, like, okay, this is where I am. What type of therapy do you do? How can you grow with me if that's going to be the case? Like, do you feel like you ask those same questions now, like when you're meeting a therapist?
Yes. And I don't know if anyone here is in the market for a therapist, but Psychology Today is an amazing resource. I feel like it's like Tinder for the dating of therapists. Yes, which is so real, because if you're going to be processing these big life circumstances with someone, you want to feel connected with them and you want to feel in alignment. And you also want to make sure the services that they offer is what you're looking to receive. You know, like if you're looking for something deeper, maybe you don't just need cognitive, what is it? CBT, like the talk therapy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's huge. And I think also making sure that you are available for what you're wanting to work through. Yeah. So like in my last experience with my therapist, we had gotten through a lot of things, and then we were getting to like the deepest wound in the basket.
Yeah.
And the one that like I still haven't touched.
Yeah.
And I was like super busy at work, and I would show up and I like wasn't ready to go there in our sessions. And so I was actually going to tell her that like I think that like we're at a stopping point, and then that's when she was like, I'm going to end my practice. I was like, great, because I was going to break up with you.
Yeah, I was going to break up with you, but I like the way this has ended too. Like this is
But that's so real, and to like not give your power away and like listen to yourself. And if you're not feeling safe in a therapist's office, like move on to the next one. That's okay. And it's awesome that like if people are interested in online therapy, that like BetterHelp allows you to change therapists for free. So if someone is listening and they're like, I want to get into therapy, but maybe resources are tight right now, I think that's a really awesome place to start and be able to date around.
I think a big question I have is like, when it comes to wellness and healing, sometimes it can be unobtainable for some people because it is expensive. How can you really talk, and you've tried a lot of things, how can you help share prioritizing that financially for people?
Mm-hmm. Like therapy, particularly?
Therapy, meditation, like sometimes it's like, I think in our world, we're exposed to it. So it's like, okay, I'll try this out. But not everyone has that exact same experience. And it is pretty intimidating because you're like, okay, with insurance, I have to sign up with this. Or what if I want to try this and that looks really cool? How do I align with that? But you also are, these things cost. And a lot of times people say a good therapist costs, but that's not always the case. You can find some really great people who can help you where you are.
Yeah. I wish I had a silver bullet answer for this, but I don't. But that really has been my MO since I got into really fitness, but then also wellness, is just recognizing that, I mean, I was raised by a single mom. I know the people that need this stuff the most often don't have the resources for it.
Yeah.
I mean, it's amazing that we have the internet and we do have access to really amazing therapists and healers. So one person I will throw out, her name is Sarah Baldwin. I think she actually just started a podcast. She is an incredible, I don't think she's a therapist, but she's I think she's a polyvagal, I don't know her actual title.
Yeah.
But she works a lot with the nervous system,
okay.
which I think that's where everyone should start. Just trying to get your nervous system a little more regulated, and then you can go from there, starting to like talk about things, process things. But I think that would be step one for me, is like just getting on the internet and finding, there are therapists too that like put out a lot of great information.
That's free.
Yeah, exactly. Or just like finding someone you really connect with. If it's like a Brene Brown, or like there's just so many amazing thought leaders in the world who don't just have books now. They have podcasts, they have interviews, they have more like long form content. So I think finding someone that you resonate with is huge.
Michael Bernard Beckwith is mine.
Yes.
I'm like obsessed.
Yes. Michael Singer, like whatever, if it's one book or one author, just finding someone and then diving into their work.
Yeah.
Like I will find someone and then just like go deep
You're
on it.
obsessed with them. Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Like I listen.
they said, yeah.
Yes, I'm just like I listen to every podcast that they're on. Like I just love to learn because we can.
Yeah.
In these like longer form interviews, I just feel like there's so much goodness in them. And a lot of times you see someone as they are today, but then you learn about their life and you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
And like, for example, the Sarah Baldwin that I mentioned, just hearing her voice, I get like immediately grounded because she's just such a, I don't even know. If you listen to her, see her, you'll understand immediately. But she had a wildly traumatic upbringing. And so I don't know, just getting to like learn about people's lives. Also, I would say, this just came to me, but there's a book called No Bad Parts, and it's by the guy who invented IFS, Dick Schwartz.
Okay.
And it's like it's basically like the IFS handbook. So I would say if you have $10 and you want to get that book, I've listened to it on Audible and it's fantastic. But that could be a great way to start kind of doing some self-therapy on you. Because with IFS specifically, what I really love is the intention is for you to carry it with you forever. The therapists that practice IFS, they don't want you in there for months and months on end. They want to do some sessions with you, give you these tools, and then send you on your way. So that when I notice like a protector part comes up or this comes up, I can use the tools that I have from IFS to settle those parts back down, get the self to come back up.
So I have a question there because you brought up self-therapy, but also how do you differentiate self-therapy with people who are self-diagnosing and not going beyond, like, you know, you're researching what you need, but then they're just staying there.
Yeah. That's huge. You should not be diagnosing yourself for anything. Even like ADHD, all of these like kind of like buzzier terms, narcissism, all of these things, they should be diagnosed by a professional.
Yeah.
And when I say self-therapy, I'm really meaning like self-inquiry.
Yeah.
That's what I'm meaning. I think we need someone to see our blind spots. Yeah. I can't do self-therapy on myself, or I'll just like skirt past those, like, you know, like I'm like turn.
It's not a red flag. It's fine. We're good.
Yeah, we need reflection, and like we need that in other people. Like I feel like sometimes my partner is my therapist just because how he sees sometimes the ugly parts of me, and I'm like, ooh, wow.
But I feel like our relationships are we mirror ourselves, and like things come out, and you're like, oh wow. Oh, freaking
yes. But like I cannot emphasize enough, professional support is so necessary, especially just in that like it doesn't have to be forever. It's not like you need a therapist always, but I think if there are some kind of like bigger things that you're trying to sift through, if you can find the funds,
talk to someone.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And it also just having that kind of like verbal processing also helps you to realize things too, you know? But if you're just kind of like spinning around in your head, I don't know. I don't think you're going to.
Your spiral, like that spiral is difficult. And we all experience it. The one thing for myself, there were moments that I used to think like, oh, you're healed. And life always reminds me like healing is constant. You're forever unfolding. You're forever on this self-exploration, that it's like it's okay to meet this version of yourself where you are, and what would you like this version to look like?
Yes. I want to tell you a story that just popped into my mind, which is slightly embarrassing, but it is to the point of like, we are always healing.
Yeah.
You could meditate for 20 years and you're going to have something that's going to trigger you and you're going to respond in a way that you aren't proud of.
Yeah.
And not that I guess this isn't anything bad, but it's just like a real life example. I just think it's so important that like we maintain flexibility in our mind.
Yeah.
Like we're never healed. There's never like a check mark. There's never a gold star. Like it's just this constantly evolving process.
Yeah.
So this isn't going to get political, but when I woke up on Wednesday morning to teach a 6 a.m. class and found out that Trump was president, I was upset. Again, I'm not going to go political, but I was very excited and hopeful for Kamala and thought that it would have been just so incredible to see a woman in office. I'm not going to talk anymore about that. But I was upset when I woke up. Like And as someone who's experienced sexual abuse, to see Trump in office, I was just like, whoa.
Yeah.
So on my close friends, I got on there with mad fingers. I was just going crazy
Twitter
on my
fingers
close
just
friends.
going, but we're on, yeah.
Yes, and I have a good amount of Republican friends that voted for Trump. I wasn't even thinking about that, girl. It was 4:30 a.m. Because I was pretty silent this whole election.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, I woke up and I was just like, I do not understand, blah, blah, blah. And I wasn't saying mean things, but I was very much processing my emotions on my close friends on Instagram. And I verbatim said, and I am not open to any conversation about this. Like, what is that? I'm just going to yell at all my friends and then say, I am not open to talking about
you're
this.
like, what?
Yeah, it's so.
4 a.m. That shit happens.
Yes. Yeah. And so then, of course, like my friends that voted for Trump, they're reaching out to me. They're genuinely sharing with me why they voted for him. And I was all riled up. And then I taught my yoga class, went and took a walk, and I literally felt my bones settle. And I could, like, hear them. And not just, like, hear them from a place of, like, defensiveness or from anger, but, like, truly from their perspective and their lens.
Place of compassion.
Yeah, and they all had different lenses. One of my friends is Jewish, and she was upset with how the Democrats had handled everything. And then another friend was really worried about the whole, like, RFK thing. And, so I really tried to hear their sides. And then I came back to my close friends. I posted another little rant and said, I'm sorry for how, even though I didn't feel like I needed to apologize, but that's not the kind of person I want to be. I don't want to just yell at people and say, and I'm not open to a conversation.
I think as you're telling this story, it's that I'm not open. And like as a person, you are open and receptive to people's ideas, different perspectives, everything. But in that moment, you were like shut down. Something in you was like, no, this is like not okay. This is not fair. Like, yeah.
Yeah, but then to go back into like within like 12 hours and to say like, I've had some really good conversations with my friends who voted for Trump today. I don't agree, but we were able to have a conversation. I think that is huge right now, like because everyone's just yelling at each other. But I think like to be able to soften and come back and say, okay, I hear you, let's talk. And then also to, like, own your shit. To be like, hey, I didn't handle that well. I apologize. I wish I would have been more open. I'm open now. Yeah. And I think that's something, like, no matter how much work you do on yourselves, like, we always just have to stay malleable and stay flexible and stay open. And, like, yes, of course, there's still a part of me that, like, doesn't get it. But, like, I don't know. I also do.
But I think when you talk about being open, I think that can apply to so much. How did you become a person who could be open? Because I think a lot of times when you find that, and I'm going back to like when you felt you were very reactive and your emotions were all over, sometimes people cannot be open within that space. And it's not that they don't want to, it's because they really don't know how to. And so you sharing this story really did bring me up to be like, wow, that's a beautiful, like, what you're sharing is so beautiful because so many people deal with, like, no, I'm not open to communicate after this. Like, this has happened. Maybe it's them saying, I'm setting my boundary, so I can't be open anymore to this. How do you navigate that, like, what open is? And being receptive and being understanding and not, like, necessarily feeling like you're going past your boundaries or allowing people to come in and go past your boundaries?
I think a big part of it is, one, checking in and making sure that you have, like, the space and the capacity for those conversations because, again, it's not productive to just, like, say things without being ready to have a conversation about it and be open to feedback and then, like, give that feedback back and forth. Why, to answer your question, why I stay open or why I am open, that's because I've just seen such profound change internally in myself. And I feel like I've changed so much that I truly believe anyone can change at any moment, at any time. I don't think it has to be this whole, like, 3-month situation. I think me and you could walk out of here different. You know, you could go to church, you could go to a class, you could take a deep breath and be like, I don't want to be like this anymore.
Yeah.
You know, like I truly, truly believe that. And I think in moments of anger, it's really easy to be sharp and rigid and closed off.
Yeah.
But then really it was just like getting outside and moving. And then like I was like, we're all humans. And like, really, I'm not a political person. In 2020, things felt so social that I had to become political.
Yeah.
And now I feel like I have way more of like skin in the game than I ever had in my life, or just like care. But really, I think it's just, I wish I had like like a silver bullet, or like take this pill and it'll make you open. But like shaking your body, taking a few big deep breaths, and also making sure that that person is like ready to engage in a true conversation with you too. Like if we are still talking politics, like if they're just wanting to like scream at each other, that feels different. And that's where we can say, we're going to
agree to disagree.
Yeah, because I do have one friend who she just wants to yell at me, and so I do just put that boundary. And like we didn't talk that day. Like she tried to send me some things, and I said, look, I know where you are. You know where I am. I don't see that moving, so let's just love each other. And this is a girl that's been like a sister of mine since 2nd grade.
Yeah.
So no, we're not just going to yell at each other, because what's that going to change?
Yeah. Because when you're yelling, you can't really hear. Like you're responding, you're not listening to respond, you're ready to react and respond.
Exactly.
And I get often from people like, Jazz, you're a really good listener, but I had to, and I brought up the question about being open because I feel like it often starts with yourself. Like you saying how you were open to just like, I can change at any point in time. And that's my silver bullet of like, anything you're trying to change, it really starts with self. If you want to be more open with external people, your friends, your family, it has to start with you gifting yourself that grace. And then you'll see it start to naturally appear, and every situation, conversation becomes this opportunity that's presented to you right then and there to say, right now, I can either be closed off or I can be open. Mm-hmm. And like, that's where I'm like, I try to keep that open heart. There's so many times that I'm like, you are a bit too open-hearted because they are just unkind people and we need to just like look at it for what it is. But I'm like, but I love people and I'm open and people have the ability to change, so I'm going to love you anyway, you know?
That's so real. Literally the other day, my boyfriend was like, you don't have to be friends with everyone, Ella. And I was like, oh, true.
That's great. I just don't want to be unkind.
Yeah.
Like, I do love people, even if it's like, we may not like each other or like we may, and I don't even say not like each other because it's like, I don't dislike any. You have to have done something really unkind. But even then, like, my compassion radar is so much more that I'm like, I got compassion for whoever you are. Mm-hmm. That's on you. I can still love you.
Yes. I think a visual that really helps me, I like saw this a few years ago when I was teaching fitness. People would come in and I felt like the arms around their heart were just closed.
Yeah.
Especially people in Dallas. Like, they're just like,
let's get this over with.
Yes, and just like, and I think it was also just around the time too where I was like really waking up to privilege and like my own, and I'm like, y'all all have enough money to drive a car, come to this expensive studio, take this class, like open the arms around your heart, like literally, like look at your neighbor, say hello, like get out of your own little like, and I heard something the other day too that was like, when we're moving fast, we're in fear. And like that, I feel like that was just all of Dallas. It was just like everyone arms around their arms crossed, moving fast. But I feel like if anyone is trying to open, like even if you just like close your eyes and like imagine what it would feel like to have your arms crossed around your heart and then like the arms around your heart opening.
Yeah.
And even just that like little internal energetic shift can help you to soften. And like, I'm such an advocate and proponent of like meditation can truly be 3 deep breaths.
Yeah.
And like it doesn't have to be this whole like 15, 20-minute process. Like if you're going to have a hard conversation or you're going into a meeting, like close your eyes, take a few breaths, like speak some like life and some wisdom over yourself and then like go into that conversation.
Yeah.
I think just like these tiny micro pauses are like so underlooked, but they can make such a difference.
A huge difference. It's literally just an inhale and an exhale. Well, Ella, me and Ella could go deep all day long. This has been such an amazing, comfortable conversation. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for giving so many tips and resources to people. Guys, we will make sure to share out all those little snippets and books and things that Ella shared. Do you have any last comments you want to share?
The last thing I want to say is I just want to acknowledge you, Jazz. Like, you just get shit done. And, like, I am just so proud of you, and I'm so excited to see where Honeydew flies off to now. And I'm just so happy that you're having these comfortable conversations because they're so necessary. And you're such a great guide and host, and I'm just so proud of you and just truly grateful to know you and just feel lucky.
Oh, my gosh, thank you. Talk about endings. I'm like, thank you. Let me give you a big
And keep your arms around your heart open, people.